Hi everyone, it's me again. This week, exactly 1 year ago, I found my birth family in China and I met them. And I can't believe it's already been a year. And I didn't know anything about them. I had zero information. I didn't know their names. I didn't know whether I had siblings. I didn't know why I was given up and how I ended up in orphanage. And I didn't even know if they were alive. But still, somehow, with a lot of luck, we found each other. And today I want to share my story. I want to share how I found them and what it took for me to actually find them. I will share practical tips and searching methods, the ones I used and the ones I think will be very useful for other adoptees who are also interested in searching for their birth parents. And I know that searching can be very overwhelming. I remember when I first started my search, it just felt too much because there are so many different search techniques, and I wish that when I started my search I had someone with me who could guide me, because it is a lot. And since posting about my reunion online, I received a lot of private messages from you guys asking me for tips and tricks and different searching methods. And I always respond to these messages because, of course, I want to help anyone as much as I can. But then again, I know that I am not an expert, I am not a professional. I don't even speak fluent Chinese, let alone know the culture surrounding adoption within China. But since I noticed that so many people have been asking me these questions, and since it's been a year since I found them, I thought, why not share my own experiences, my own tips. If this somehow can help people, if this somehow can inspire people, why not make a video about it? So first I need to explain how I began, and I need to explain what really pushed me starting this whole search, because this might be relatable for other adoptees or relevant. If you want to skip to the tips, you can skip to. So before finding them, as I said before, knew nothing about my birth parents. I only had the documents, the official documents from China, and I stayed in China for the first 1.5 years. And for me, this period of my life has always been a blur. I was always curious about this period. So I started when I was 18 years old. And before that, in my teenage years mainly, I struggled with my identity, with my adoption, and I also had a depression because I got bullied in high school. I felt very ashamed for being adopted, and I just felt insecure about my whole being, and I felt like I was worth nothing because I am in between. I am in between being Chinese and Dutch. I am Dutch because I have a Dutch passport, I have Dutch parents, I speak Dutch, I grew up in the Netherlands. But at the same time, when people see me, they think I am Chinese. And when they ask me about my Chinese side, or when they make racist comments, there's nothing I can do about it because I also didn't know anything and I had nothing to really defend myself. I basically hit rock bottom. And then after a lot of internal work, after a lot of reflection, I healed, and it was then that I really began to ask questions about my past, about my Chinese side and my Chinese, history and roots. And for me, this began with taking a DNA test. So I think it's important to keep in mind that I started when I was 18 years old, and I found my birth family last year when I was 26 years old, meaning that it took 8 years for me to finally find them. And I will explain step by step everything I did in order to find them, from most easiest to most difficult step. So as I mentioned, the first thing I did when I was 18 years old was doing a DNA test. I did this with 2 companies, I think, with 23andMe and MyHeritage. And to get the results, you usually have to wait for like a few weeks. And here you can find potential relatives. And it's also really important to upload this raw DNA data to other databases, like GED Match, Family Tree DNA. You can check online what companies accept what DNA information and DNA results. Also keep in mind that these companies are Western-based banks, so the chances of finding your direct relatives, so finding your birth mom and birth dad, will be very small. And also, to improve your chances of finding them, you can upload your raw data to Chinese data banks. You have WeGene and 23andMe. I did this, and when I did this it was free, but it might be different now. So as I said, the chance of really finding family is really small. I remember when I first uploaded my DNA, I was very nervous. But the closest relatives I ever found in these DNA banks were like third generation cousin, and that's like very far removed. That's basically nothing. However, I do know there are cases in which a sister is found, or in which a cousin or aunt is found, and through them you can trace back the birth family. So I say it's definitely worth giving a try. So to continue, you really need to gather all the information you have. Your adoption papers, pictures, your estimated date of birth, orphanage name, the finding place, even the clothing you were found in. I know in many cases this information might not be true, even if you think it's not reliable. You only know for sure once you find your birth family and can confirm these things. Because in my case, the very little information I did have turned out to be correct. And even if you think you have no information at all, everything counts. Even your orphanage name or even a certain picture can help. So the specific documents you really need to be looking for and you will need are your certificate of adoption, both Chinese and translated copies, certificate of birth, both Chinese and translated copies, and certificate of abandonment, both Chinese and translated copies. A fourth document might be a finding ad. And not all adoptees have one because a finding ad only became mandatory since 1999. And what does a finding ad really mean? So from 1999, before you could adopt a child, the welfares had to submit a finding ad in a local newspaper to allow parents to come forward and claim their child. This ad contained various information like the earliest image of a child, the name assigned by the orphanage, the location, finding location, when the child was found, estimated birth date, special medical conditions, and the name of the orphanage that had custody. It's always smart that if you have a finding ad to compare the finding ad information with your own certificates of the orphanage. So another thing I did in my early search was joining Facebook groups. And you have many of them. In these groups they share their own experiences, but they also share tips, and I would highly recommend just joining these groups and read each other's experiences. I think it's very valuable also to have a clear picture of what does it mean to search and what kind of things can happen along a search. Sometimes you have specific Facebook groups for your orphanage. In my case, there was a specific Facebook group for my orphanage. And again, I'd highly recommend joining these groups because they can provide valuable information specifically for that orphanage. Also, joining these Facebook groups and online communities is very valuable because it makes you feel like you're not alone. And it's true because you are not alone. And if you have questions, you can usually just ask them in a group and someone will reply. And in general, everyone is very respectful towards each other and everyone helps each other. So ECSA is an organization for adoptees. It's mainly run by adoptive moms, adoptive parents who also adopted a child from China. And they help with these search posters per province. So you can reach out to them and they will ask you certain information like your birth of date, finding location, and they ask for a picture which looks like this. So they make an ad and combine all these ads and put it in a poster for each province, and they share these posters on Chinese social media. For this you have to download WeChat, which is a Chinese version of WhatsApp. Again, the chances of finding birth family via this method, so via these search posts, is very small. But then again, I know some adoptees personally who actually found their birth parents via this method. So they were added on this poster. The poster got shared on social media, and then the family in China, the birth family, saw this poster and was like, they seem familiar. And then they did a test and then it turned out it was a match. So it can happen, but then again, the chances are very small, but it's still worth trying. Also, I really encourage you to have a look at their website. They share valuable information about different searching methods and also tips and resources. So now that you have downloaded your first Chinese social media, which is WeChat, you can now download other social media platforms like Douyin, which is the Chinese TikTok, or Hongshaoshu, which is also a very popular Chinese social media platform. And here you can create your own search post or a video, in the hope that it goes viral and in the hope that it reaches your birth family in China. I did this too, but I didn't find anyone. But it was still very interesting to see the reactions of the Chinese citizens and also learn how people see adoption and international adoption. And be aware, many Chinese people aren't really understanding and aren't familiar with the concept of international adoption. They often don't understand that children, when they are adopted abroad, would even go look for their family because they feel like your parents threw you away, so why bother looking? But as you might know, in many cases it's not as simple as that. In many cases people were forced due to the policies back then. But I would say try to ignore these negative comments as much as possible, because you also have supportive people. You also have a lot of people that root for you and that understand your search for your past, your Chinese roots and Chinese family. So focus on the positive things and not the negative things. And again, the chances of finding your family with this method are very small. But I know someone personally who made a TikTok video and who went viral and who found their birth parents via going viral. So it's not impossible, so just give it a try. So Baby Huijia is a Chinese platform on which Chinese parents search for their lost children or the other way around. So lost children search for their Chinese parents or Chinese relatives. And it's mainly about people who got trafficked. And I didn't know this back then, but there are many cases of human trafficking in China. I was very shocked when I saw this website and I saw how many people were looking for their lost relatives. But still, it's really worth having a look at this website and creating an account for yourself. So I won't go into detail on how to make an account. The organization I just talked about, ICSA, made a very good guideline, which I will link down below. So once you create your own account and create your own searching ad, you can also look at the already existing ads and see if there's an overlap. And another important thing about this website is that it's linked to the national database of China. And this database is really important because many people get matched via this database. If you have WeChat, I would recommend following the Baby Huijia groups and maybe joining the chats. I know in the Netherlands we have an organization for Dutch Chinese adoptees. There are many volunteers who go to the adoptees and help them make a search ad and also post videos and try to make them go viral. So the Nanchang project is a great organization since it's run by Chinese adoptees and for Chinese adoptees. They share great tips and guides on how to find your birth family. They also work together with many volunteers from China and also within China. And they also help you get a blood sample from China that gets sent back and will be put into the national database of China. When you reach out to the Nanchang project, they can help you with this and they will link you to a Chinese volunteer who will help you with this blood sample process. You can find the link for this down below. One thing I think which is worth mentioning about this database, you will only get notified if there's a direct link between child father and child mother. So for instance, you won't get notified if there's a match between you and your sister or you and your aunt. It's really for the parent-child relationship. And I know nowadays many adoptees find their match via this method, and in some cases it can take years before a match is actually made. An example, you, the adoptee, put your blood into this database. Nothing happens, no match. But 3 years later, your father's blood is also put into this database because he did something bad and he has to go to the police. But then the match is made. I personally know many adoptees who got matched via this method, so it's definitely worth trying. I also did this, but when I did this, nothing happened. So I actually did all of this for the last couple of years and nothing happened. And I concluded that my final try would be to go to China myself, to hire a searcher and to give it one final try. And back then in my mind this was really my final try because I also want to go on with my life. I want to have this peace of mind, and if that wouldn't work out, going to China, I'd stop trying. I had peace with it and I knew I at least gave it my all. So this process can be very time consuming because going to China, of course, and arranging a trip and getting days off and finding a searcher who you really trust takes time. So you can find searchers on various platforms. What is a searcher? A searcher basically is someone who is Chinese, who lives in China, and who knows about the whole adoption system, who has years of experience, who knows the Chinese culture, and also who knows the sensitivity around adoption and around international adoption. I think it's very important that if you find someone or if you are in contact with someone, they have to have these skills and knowledge. So you have various platforms on which you can find a guide, a searcher, on Nanchang, on ICSA, My China Roots, or other organizations. So I reached out to multiple organizations and I asked for prices to compare. And one thing you have to keep in mind, is going to be expensive. When I looked, hiring a searcher would cost between $150 and $250 per day. Bruh. Which I think is a lot of money, especially when there is no guarantee that they will find your birth parents. So it's really important to take your time to investigate and to do your research and feel what organization and what person feels right for you. And I am not going to recommend a specific organization or a specific searcher, because this also really depends on you as a person, like what are your needs and what's your situation. But I do want to advise you to listen to your feelings. And once you notice that a person or an organization is trying to put pressure on you for making a decision, you run, because that's definitely a red flag. So once you do find a searcher, he or she will usually help you arrange a visit to the orphanage, a visit to the police station, maybe a visit to the local hospital, help you with spreading your social media posts and your search posts online, reach out to news outlets in that specific area, and make and hand out flyers. And honestly, for this, there's not much you can do than to trust the process and trust the searcher. And if you're extremely lucky, then you will find your birth parents. And it might not be during that trip, but maybe a few months after that trip or a few years after the trip. So in my case, I really found them because I went to China myself and I hired a searcher. So I found them on the 3rd day and I met them on the 5th day in China. And again, I have to say I was extremely lucky. And recently I talked to a lot of other adoptees who also got reunited with their birth family in China. And if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that each reunion is so unique and different. And what worked for me does not have to work for someone else. And that's why I won't go into detail too much about how I found them, and of course due to privacy. But all I can say is that for me, really going to China, really showing up and have a searcher made this reunion happen. And when it comes to reunions, one thing is so important to know. It's all about luck and timing. And sadly, this is something we as individuals have no control over. But there are things we can do in order to increase our chances of finding our birth family in China, such as all things I mentioned in my video. Also, we do have control over our own mindset and our own attitude. And for me, my mindset and attitude, being open-minded, have no judgment towards my birth family, be understanding and empathetic, and to clearly communicate this to everyone in China really made a difference for me. And I'm sure there are still many things I didn't mention, many tips and many searching methods. So feel free to add these in the comment section. And I just want to end this by saying that if you are on this searching journey or if you are interested, know that you're not alone in this. There are so many people like you, there are so many people rooting for you. And also online, there are so many supportive communities. Also keep in mind that it's a journey that won't end once you find them. Because for me, I thought that finding my birth family would end my whole adoption chapter, my whole adoption story. And in a way it did, but at the same time it also opened a whole new chapter. A chapter for which I wasn't really prepared for. And in the movies and in the media, it seems like a fairy tale to find your birth family. But honestly, it's nothing like that. Though it's beautiful, it's also painful, it's also shameful, and it's so confusing. And it takes time to process all of the new information. But as time goes by, you will slowly get there. And without the help of so many people, I never could have done this. So I want to thank everyone who helped me through this, who supported me through my journey, my parents, my partner, my friends, and everyone online who was supporting me, rooting for me and helping me. And I really hope that with this video I can somehow give back and do the same for you. Because know that you've got this, you are strong no matter what outcome. Ciao!